Okay, so we're going to revisit the second and third fire signs. They're occurring on the 21st of Chislev and 22nd of Chislev. Now, we can deduce that from the super Pentecostal pattern that we did in the last talk, but there's an easier way to do it. Because Elijah said to the attendant, go back 7 times. He said, go up, look in the direction of sea, and go back 7 times. Now, if you go back 7 times from 2019, Chislev 21, our present date, you end up on 2012, Chislev 21, which was when we were appointed over Zoar. We were appointed on Heshvan 2, 2012. We were installed over the 2 NCs and Zoar at the late or second 2 NC Pentecost on Chislev 21, 2012. So that's when we went up. That's when we went up the mountain of Zoar. It says Elijah goes to the top of Carmel. Well, I got to the top of Carmel from a 2 NC standpoint, and we are a 2 NC church, and we have no 1 NCs in it as yet. So I got to the top of Carmel on 2012, Chislev 21. 7 years later, fire sign. And that also works for Laodicea for the first fire sign, because they were installed 2003, Chislev 21, to feed the 1 NC reserves, it being a second installation pursuant to our installation, which was to feed was a 98 Heshvan 21. So we were installed to feed at the regular 2 NC Pentecost, and they were installed to feed at the late 2 NC Pentecost, because they're the second installation. And if you go 7 years from there, from 2003 Chislev 21, their installation, when they went up the mountain, because they were my attendant. I mean, they never listened to me, they should have, but they were my boy, they took my baptism. They were also 2 NC saints, so they were my boy from that standpoint, my future wife, I should say. So they were installed 2003 Chislev 21. 7 years later, 2010 Chislev 21 is the first fire sign in Israel, the largest fire in modern Israel's history on Mount Carmel, from Chislev 20 to Chislev 23, 2010. Now our attendant, the LWs, we saw it as a fire sign, or one of us did, on the Sabbath, the weekly Sabbath, which was Chislev 22, 2010. But the Laodiceans may have seen it on the 7th Sabbath of second 2 NC weeks, which was Chislev 20, because that's witnessed to by the sentence count of, and the attendant said, look, a small cloud like a man's palm rising from the sea, that counts as 7 times. And he said that it came about in the 7th, so that's 7 sevens, so that's a witness to the 7th Sabbath, which was Chislev 20. But anyway, it's very simple. You go up the mountain, you go 7 times forward, get the fire sign, or you go to the fire sign, go 7 times backwards. It's when we went up the mountain. So Laodicea reached the top of their installation to feed when their administration was installed, and then 7 years later there's a fire sign on Mount Carmel, the first fire sign. We reached the top of our Zoar administration, 2012 Chislev 21. 7 years later there's a second fire sign. So that's a much simpler proof, more simple proof than the Super Pentecost. But the Super Pentecost is nonetheless a valid proof, and the whole of 1 Kings 18 is enumerated in 50s. It's all about Pentecosts. It's the ambiguity of this phrase. You know, he said, go up, look in the direction of the sea. Then he said, go back 7 times. He did not say, go back up 7 times. He said, go back 7 times. So it could mean go back up. It could just mean go back. It could mean go forwards. It could mean go backwards. It depends whether you go back into the future or you go back into the past. You know, you go back and repeat what you've done in the future, or you go backwards into the past. It depends whether it means go back to where you were, go backwards, to go up. There's so many deliberately ambiguous possible meanings. All of them will give you the correct result if you logically follow them through, but in a different way. And now there's another one, because here's the one that's an absolute slam dunk. This is not dependent on anything we've worked out. It's all dependent on physical dates. I delivered my first, well, I didn't, Masood delivered my first letter to the Society, 1992 LL11, to the 12 governing body members, 12 copies of this book, and a great big chart of all the chronology we had back then, delivered by Masood, hand-delivered, on LL11, 1992. That began a day of enlightenment for the Watchtower. And then it says, it came about at noon that Elijah mocked the prophets of Baal, and he said, you know, maybe he's asleep, maybe he's on holiday. everybody ought to wake up, blah, blah, blah. Well, I sent a letter, the Sign of Jonah letter on 2006 CR1, mocking them and really slamming them and telling them they were going to get nuked by the second fire sign. It was a bit over the top. But I seriously mocked them. Now that was 4,910 BLC days after I sent the first letter to the Society in 1992 LL11. But noon is the middle of the day. So if you count another 4,910 BLC days, guess where you end up? You end up on 2019 Chislev 21. So, if the day of my dealings with the Watchtower began as it did, 1992 LL11, and if noon, when I mocked them, and that's that was the serious time I mocked them. I took them apart, or tried to, with what I knew, because they were responsible for murdering all the two NCs, not holding the Passover correctly, making a false church. It was terrible. And that's 27 years and 100 days. And it's actually witnessed to in Isaiah, which says, make their hearts solid, or something, paste their eyes together, stop up their ears, in order that they will not see with their eyes, hear with their ears, or understand with their heart. That counts as 25 times. It's heart plus ears plus eyes times heart plus ears plus eyes. That's all in perfect tense. Then in above consecutive perfect, it says, and they don't turn round and they don't get healing. That's another 2, that makes 27. So it's 27 years when they don't listen, and then the fire signs wake them up and they do. And in the middle of that period, I sent that letter, bang, centre, in the noon. So I always could have deduced the length of this contest if I'd understood this before, but I only understood it a day or two ago. The length between my first letter to the Society and the start of the contest is the length of the contest. And Jesus' actions are always temporally central. So in this day of my being ignored by the Watchtower until the fire signs occur, in that day Jesus came in the middle of it and had me send that letter, if there is indeed a fire sign on the 21st of Chislev 2019. Okay, so that's 2. Then there's another one. We made Alan into an apostle on 2015 Chislev 21. And he was actually at the time the 6th apostle, but 2 of our apostles left the church, so now we've only got 4. So those are the 4 angels tied upon the Euphrates in Revelation 9, because Euphrates is a river and apostles have a water jar. So they're also the 4 water jars of 1 Kings 18 that Elijah pours onto the sacrifice he makes. And what the scripture says is the 6th angel trumpeted, which is me, I'm the 6th angel. It's the angels of Revelation. I'm the 6th of the 6th congregation, the angel of Philadelphia. So he trumpeted. And I heard the voice out of the horns of the altar, there are 4 horns on the altar, the golden one in the sight of God, saying to the 6th angel, the one having the trumpet, loose the 4 angels, the ones that had been bound upon the river, the great Euphrates, and were loosed the 4 angels, the ones having been prepared, into the hour, the day, the month, and the year, in order that they may kill 1/3 of the men. See, 4 angels will kill 1/3 of the men, because you need 12 angels to make 12 apostles to kill all the men. Men are the saints, they're being killed to Adam, baptized non-Adamically as a death to Adam. So you kill the people to Adam, and they get resurrected non-Adamically, and they can do 1/3 of them because they're 1/3 of the apostles. But the point is this: there's 4 horns to the altar. There's 4 angels bound on the river. And the 4 angels have been prepared for the hour, the day, the month, and the year. Those are 4 times. So everything in here is a witness to 4 times. An hour, a day, a month, and a year are 4 different times. And there's 4 of them. So 4 times after Alan was made into the 4th apostle, 2015 Chislev 21 is 2019 Chislev 21. That is the day and the hour and the month and the year of the fire sign, which releases these 4 angels to baptize people, dunking them in the Euphrates. Now, they already do it before then. The first release was of Pastor Zach. He's the first guy who we baptized non-Adamically into Zoa after the end of the Zoa externate times on 2019 December 15. We baptized him Tammuz 2. And that was the beginning of it, and you can get that by doing the sentence count of Revelation 9, 13 to 15, and that's covered in Understanding 151. If you sentence count all of that, you end up with Zach's baptism. But the big message from it, Zach's baptism didn't release all 4 angels, really. I mean, it's not, well, we were released, but nothing much happened. And we start baptising the saints prior to fire signs. In fact, we baptise all the 2NC saints prior to the fire signs. But that's not the big baptism. The Euphrates, the big river, the big baptism of all the priests, that begins after the fire signs. And so what releases us for them is 4 times. 4 times after Alan became an apostle is when we get the fire sign. Alright, so those are 3 cute proofs of 2019 Chislev 21 for the second fire sign. Now at the time of distress. We thought it ran from 2019 Chislev 14 to 2020 Chislev 14 because that's the end of Adam, but obviously there's a Babylonian Passover execution with all the Zoharites from all the religions of the world which weren't Christian, we call them Babylonians, from Babel, and so does the Bible. They are Passover executed on Chislev 14. That will cause distress. You know, you're talking about 500 million or 1 billion people being executed. That will cause massive distress. But they get resurrected on Chislev 16, and that will end the distress. So the time of distress ends with their resurrection on Chislev 16, 2020, so it begins on Chislev 16, 2019. And according to 2 Chronicles 29, they finished baptising the 2NCs, House of Jehovah, on the 16th of the month. This is the 16th of the first month. We take it to be the first month of the fire signs of Zoah getting going, of the Holy Spirit and the spies appearing to Zoah, whatever, of the time of distress, and of the day of Jehovah, actually. So all the saints are into Zoah before the time of distress begins. Oh, and incidentally, it's during the marriage feast that the volcano goes off, that fills the skies with ash, that causes the darkness and gloominess of the day of Jehovah. The day of Jehovah, let me read you what Joel said. Incidentally, first of all, the count of Zephaniah 1 is not 13 times, it's 12 times. So it didn't start in Heshvan, it starts in Chislev. And Joel gives it away, Joel 2, 1 and 2. He says, "Blow ye a trumpet in Zion. Shout ye in hill of holiness of me. Let them tremble all the ones sitting off the land." Now, Rosh Hashanah is the festival of trumpet blowing, shouting and terror, which is all the constituents I just read you. Except that blow ye is a Hebrew plural 3 times. Shout ye is a Hebrew plural 3 times. Let them tremble all the ones sitting of the land, a Hebrew plural 3 times. So we're talking 3 Rosh Hashanahs, or late Rosh Hashanah, or 2019 Chislev 1, rather than 2019 Tishri or Heshvan. And then it says, because day of Jehovah comes, because close he is, so that counts as 3 plus 3 plus 3 is 9, times 1 plus 1, 2, which is 18. Then it says day of darkness and gloom he is, that's 2 times, day of cloud and blackness, 2 times. Like dawn spreading upon the mountains, which is plus, well, that day, I'm not quite sure the count. Dawn spreading upon the mountains is a Hebrew plural plus 1, which is 4, but it's like. So which is what is like. The day is like, he is like, but it's nothing is said. So I don't know whether that's 4 or 5. So you end up with 26 or 27 times. So in other words, the day of Jehovah begins, it's the day of gloominess and darkness and everything. It's not going to begin during the 5th marriage. It isn't. Because that's the day of rejoicing. It's the completed Holy Spirit marriage feast. It will begin on the 27th, 28th. But the volcanic ash, nonetheless, begins before then, because the sun goes dark, the moon doesn't give its light, the stars withdraw their brightness and everything prior to the day of Jehovah, of Joel 2, Zephaniah 1, Amos 5, Malachi 4, Isaiah 13, Acts 2, all refer to this day of Jehovah, or day of the Lord in the case of Acts. And it's the day of, I think it starts with the baptism of the priests, which starts Chislev 27, 28, something like that, and it ends with the absolute end of Adam, because it's the day of the extermination of the 25% who aren't going to make it into the kingdom. and of 25% of those who do make it into the kingdom but who get resurrected back. The Omega Covenant, Zoe writes. Because the final salvation covenant, the Omega Covenant, you have to die in order to be saved, because you're in the same position as the faithful robber who was crucified next to Jesus. He said, do you not fear God now that we're in the same judgment? And the judgment he was in was you have to die and then you can be resurrected. Because Jesus said, truly you will be with me in paradise, I tell you today. He did not say you're not going to die. He died and then you'll be resurrected into paradise. And that's the condition of the 25% who don't make it into the ark. They get killed at Passovers. The Christians going 2020 Tishri 14, the worldly people 2020 Heshvan 14, the Babylonians 2020 Chislev 14, then they get resurrected at first fruits thereafter, which is Tishri 20, Heshvan 18 and Chislev 16. So that's the day of Jehovah begins after the marriage. The time of distress begins before the final marriage of the Holy Spirit. There are 5 marriages it gets. Now, is there anything else in this talk I wanted to say? Yes. Okay, the symbolism of the Passover door. The Passover door, blood on the left and right doorpost and on the lintel. What do these stand for? Well, the lintel has no contact with the ground. Now, the third marriage feast was Tishri 17 to 23. And the HLCs were raptured, the Heavenly Law Covenant people were raptured from Laodicea up to that feast, along with the third bride. They were the wedding guests. The fourth marriage has no guests because the lintel is not in contact with the ground. And the reason it has no guests is it occurs from Heshvan 22 to Heshvan 28. And Laodicea became a false church on Heshvan 22. So, because it's 3.5 times of Revelation 12 of feeding the 1NC reserve woman in a place prepared by God, which was the reappointed Laodicea, which feeding began at their reinstallation on Ab 7, which is the third 1NC Pentecost, counting from first fruits on Sivan 18, third 1NC first fruits on 2019 Sivan 18, and you count 3.5 times of Revelation 12 after that, that takes you to Heshvan 22. And that's the end of their feeding because they become a false church. Another way of seeing that is that in 1 Kings 8, Solomon sent them home on the 8th day of the festival, saying, Scripture actually says, and on the 8th day he sent them away. Whereas in 2 Chronicles 7 it says he sent them away to their homes. In 1 Kings 8 is he sent them away. That is disbanding a church. He did it on the 8th day of the festival, which was late Booths, which was Heshvan 22. And another way of seeing it is that they last for many, many tekel and pass sin. So count 101 days from Ab 7, you get Heshvan 17. That's tekel day, that's when they lost their constant feature, which means their worship was rejected by God, which means they became a constructively false church awaiting the fall. God kept them going for another 5 days in order to be able to rapture the fourth bride up and then pass sin, the division, the end of the church anyway. They fell completely on Heshvan 22. So what he did is he raptured the bride up and then they fell as a church before any guests could go up. So they lasted just long enough to get the fourth bride up there. That's why it's a lintel, because Laodicea is a false church. Now, then the right doorpost is Zoa, a different church. So you need 2 churches to hold the lintel up. You need 2 posts. You can't hold it up with one. 2 churches have to hold the Passover. That is the symbolism. It's 2 churches, one of which becomes false, in order that you need a second one. Or it could be 2 churches and some other reason why the guests don't go up in the middle Passover. But there's 3 Passovers, 2 of which have guests from the earth connected with the ground. The middle one, the second one if you like, has guests only from the ark, so heavenly guests I guess you could say, turn up at that one. But there do have to be 2 churches. So we get to hold the final Watchtower Passover on 2019 Chislev 14. And today is Chislev 4 now. So in 10 days' time we should hold that Passover. Because Jesus said to Laodicea, look, I have stood upon the door and I'm knocking, and this is the Kingdom Interlinear literal translation. If anyone should hear of the voice of me and should open up the door, I shall come in towards him, and I shall have supper with him and he with me. That's eating 4 times. Jesus has supper with him and he has supper with Jesus. That's a count of 4 times. So they hold 4 Passover suppers, and we hold the 5th. And there's 5 in all. The cup of Pharaoh put it given into the hand of the chief of the cupbearers. Now we stage it, but it's still in the hand of the chief of the cupbearers, who must be a 1NC, and none of us are 1NCs. So it's a 1NC who used to be in Laodicea and now be in Zoa. It'd be Jonah, I imagine. So that's it. We will be holding this final Passover, and then we will be going up into the ark for the marriage feast on Chislev 20 to Chislev 26. And that's another meaning of going up for the attendant. He goes up into the ark, then he sees the fire sign, he goes up on the Chislev 20 and he sees the fire sign Chislev 21-22, because the instructions, go and look in the direction of the sea, are not instructions for somebody watching a TV or reading a newspaper. It's instructions for somebody actually physically looking at the event. And you're not going to see it from your house in wherever you live, but you would see it from the ark with, you know, the satellite, whatever they've got, way of, because it's a window on the world, the ark. It's God's way of seeing everything that happens on this planet. So it's a kind of hotel that holds marriages and feasts and provides a viewpoint of everything going on the planet. I should say that Chislev 21 is December 22-23, and Chislev 22 is December 23-24, 2019. Thanks.